So I guess what you're 3 or 4 days away from October 1st. What's going through Dr. Hamlet's mind right now as you step away from the superintendent role?
What's going on in my mind right now is the continued success of PPS. Although I'll be removed from my role, but I'll still my focus will still be on the success of PPS in any way I can assist possible. So definitely have I planning to whoever's going to be the interim to sit down with them and have a lengthy transition conversation and have documents with about the priorities where the district are, where we are, and priorities that the board wants to get done as well. So that work can continue.
Have they named an interim superintendent?
Not yet. I think they're going to name that person tomorrow at the legislative meeting.
Okay. What did you want, parents of PPS students to know either about your tenacity or your belief in, wanting to really improve student outcomes at Pittsburgh Public Schools?
I think, number one, I want to make sure that the parents and the community understands that I was brought in to move student achievement and decrease disparities in minority achievement as well, but also reduce the school to prison pipeline. We've done that work. We've set the district up in a way that if the focus continues, that work will continue. In every academic area over the last 5 years, we've increased. We've increased our graduation rates, especially for African-American males and females as well. We also have drastically reduced the number of out-of-school suspensions, the number of citations and arrests for our African-American students and all of our students. So for me, it's about performance. And people should be focused on student outcomes. But all too many times, that's not what goes on when it comes to public education. Because there's a few on personal agenda. And sometimes, and I ask these questions all the time to my staff, are we making an adult-centered decision or are we making a student-centered decision? And all our decisions in public education should be around students. What's the best for students? And supporting our faculty and staff and giving the requisite skills and resources that they need to make it happen for the children in the classroom.
So just piggybacking off what you were just saying, I guess I don't know if it's a specific person, but what was causing people to you to say that some people didn't have the best interest of the actual students in mind? It seemed like there's something that was blocking that, or at least trying to.
And I would say this, that's not in a malicious or intentional way about any one person, but it's about the system itself and how it's designed. And really thinking about how we make our decisions and our students involved in our decision-making process. Number one, that's why I created a student voice, the superintendent's student advisory council, to make sure students are abreast of what's going on and I get their feedback. Because ultimately, if we're not having the student's voice in mind and what their needs are and what they're feeling on a day-to-day basis, then we're missing what we're doing in public education. And all too often, that is removed. And so, just because the system is designed, we work in this space with this statement. Our system is perfectly designed to get the results we're getting. We don't like the results we're getting. I hope everyone does not like the results they're getting. So that means the system has to change. And ultimately, for any system to change, the people in the system have to change their mindset and transform themselves into a place to get that past their own personal agenda, their own personal feelings, and realize if you want to change, everyone in the system has to change to get better results for kids, if that makes sense.
What would you say is your biggest accomplishment as superintendent over the past 5 years?
That's hard. We have so many accomplishments, but it goes back to me about performance. It's about the increase in academics across the board for all of our students, and especially minority students, and also the drastic reductions in out-of-school suspensions for minority students, which puts a huge dent in the school to prison pipeline. And again, we're not satisfied with the results are, but it's a measure of progress. Means we're moving in that direction, and we're moving in the right direction as we're building the ship and flying at the same time, because there are some significant changes that need to be made in Pittsburgh Public Schools as a result of my own observations in my 90-day plan, but also the Council of Great City Schools coming in and saying, hey, if you truly want to change this system, these are some things, recommendations in these key areas that we are recommending you do to really change the system. And The recommendations were about 140 recommendations to this day. Before COVID, we had 95 of those recommendations implemented and completed in Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Can you think of one of those recommendations? I mean, do any of those recommendations stand out as being fixed by you guys?
Oh, the 90, and the 95 that we've completed.
Okay, so out of those 90, is there like a name of one of them or a couple that you can remember that were changed?
I mean, if you want to go back to academics and student performance, one of them was to actually put a K2 suspension ban in place, nonviolent suspension ban in place for our K2 students, our kindergarten and second grade students, and we did that. That was around the work. That was one of the recommendations that we highly embraced and said we want to do. We want to change the system. We put that in place. We looked at our code of conduct every year and made adjustments based on information that we're getting from the field, from our principals, from our teachers, from our board, from our community as well. We've made changes in that as well.
Right,
and also it goes to all parts of the system. Yes, it's about academics, it's about student performance when it comes to those recommendations, but it's also about structures in the central office as well.
I see. Do you believe? Well, let me ask this. It sounds as though that keeping black students, since there's a disproportionate number of African American students who may have been suspended. It sounds as though you're saying that keeping African American students in school increases the likelihood for a better education rather than just suspending them on this issue, that issue, which would improve the overall student outcomes for African Americans.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you want the kids to be educated, they need to be in the seats. And we know we went through the pandemic with remote learning. We know there are a small number of kids who thrive on remote learning, but by and large, our minority students were not thriving in the online environment. So we know the best place for our kids is in front of the teachers in their classrooms, learning from their teacher, collaborating with their peers, and working together in teams to problem solve around these curricular issues or curricular programming that's in place for them. And so that's the best place. And the forefront is always to make sure our kids are in the seat. Number one, we can help them, nurture them better in the seats in front of us every day than we can if they're in a remote environment or not coming to school at all.
Right, and also with getting rid of the K through second grade suspensions, I remember you were telling me and others that by the time African Americans get, I guess, third grade or something, the test scores, or it seems like they're so much further back than their white counterparts. So just keeping them in school early on can maybe stop that gap or lessen it.
Yeah. One of the things I want to talk about when it comes to that is this. If we want to eradicate and I don't like to say achievement gap, I like to say opportunity gap that we have. Number one, it's not that our kids are behind, but it's not as a result of part. The result of it is that they're not getting the intellectual stimulation they need from birth. And I always talk about, if you want to really truly eradicate this opportunity gap, we need to start finding ways to support children who need our support, who need that support at home, supporting their families, supporting their parents, whatever needs to happen to make sure these kids are getting what they need even before they come to kindergarten, before they come to preschool. And so by the time they come to preschool, if they get a chance to come to preschool, they're already behind because they're not getting what they need at home from birth to pre-K or birth to kindergarten.
I see. I understand. What's something that you felt as though you couldn't get done professionally at PPS that you really, had your heart set on getting done?
I would say improving student outcomes even further, but understanding the situation, the current state we're in, that we had to actually make structural changes to the system in order to maximize the efficiency for our students. And the overall collective commitment that we had as a school district to really change. I think that's the most important for me. We had some, when it comes to change, we had some, that, and it's just the nature of change, right? We say that we want change, and then when we don't, when we get the changes in front of us, then when we begin to get the pushback. Why? Because people want change, but ultimately it's just in our nature sometimes. We don't want to get out of our comfort zone and change ourselves. And ultimately, if you want to change any system or transform any system, it's about each individual person in that system collectively changing their practice, changing the way they do business, changing the way they assimilate into that culture to make it better for not just themselves as employees, for our children as well. Because we know if we're changing our system in a positive way, the impacts will resonate with our students and our student outcomes.
Okay, right. And then let me ask you this, Dr. Hamlet. Do you believe, I was just thinking back over the years, do you believe that during your tenure, there was any one person or organization, media or otherwise, that either looked to demean you or damage your professional reputation while you were here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's very clear the intent. From the very time I came here, yeah, there were issues that the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had this reporter make up stories about me, about plagiarism, about having wrong information, wrong data on my resume, which all came out to be not true. But of course, you don't hear that. That's not the truth. You just hear these headlines, and that's what begins to resonate in people's minds. Also, when it comes to one of the biggest ones is Andy Sheehan and KDKA. It's a very clear pattern of racist reporting when it comes to Dr. Hamlet out of Andy Sheehan's mouth. There are several reports, several things that he's done that are completely false and defamatory and libelous in nature.
Dr. Hamlet, do you believe that Pittsburgh overall desires or really wants a black superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools? You're the second full-time, I believe so, second full-time African-American in all of its history.
So I would say, I would go back and say I'm the third, right? So we look at John Thompson, then Linda Lane, and then myself. We're talking about African American males. Then it's me and John Thompson. Yes. But you got to think about it and look at the circumstance and the situation. It's a problem. Why can't Pittsburgh Public Schools keep a African American male superintendent in place for longevity to support the system? It's accepted of our society when it comes to individuals, African American males, being in the seat of supposed power, right? Because when it comes to the budget, and some politicians have budget envy, that Pittsburgh Public Schools has the largest budget in the city at $700 million, right? And they don't realize that the bulk of that, the majority of that is non-discretionary. So there's really not many dollars to play with because you're talking about personnel, you're talking about supports for kids, things of that nature. So when you look at a budget, if you understand the educational budget, there's not much discretionary funding in that budget to do anything with. But still, it's just that large number, like that $700 million, that's in control of those individuals.
Right.
And that becomes a problem for some.
And lastly, Dr. M, what is your message to the students of Pittsburgh Public Schools, those who will read these following comments that you'll give to them?
I would say students of Pittsburgh Public Schools do not lose faith, do not lose hope in public school system where the system is changing and evolving and will continue. We left a team of individuals that understand what the needs are, they understand the changes, and understand the push that needs to come as a result, and understanding that there'll be pushback, but they are built and designed to continue to push through to create better outcomes for our students. And ultimately, for us, it's about students. And I always talk to my staff about this, and I leave behind is, are we making student-centered decisions, or are we making adult-centered decisions? And if so, let's look at that and change, because ultimately we should be in this business to do what's best for children.